Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I've been looking into Vue.js for the past 2 to 3 weeks because it's the biggest UI framework that's not React. And as you may know from watching this channel, I am a big time believer in React.js. I drink that Kool-Aid daily, but it's sometimes healthy to look beyond your immediate comfort zone to see what else is around there. So Vue.js is the other big, very popular framework. And I was curious why it was so popular. And in some ways, looking to see what Vue.js does better than React. So after about 2-3 weeks of me doing a deep dive into Vue.js and becoming maybe a novice Vue.js engineer, because I am far from expert, but this is my novice opinion, I have a few thoughts that I figured I'd share with you on what I actually think, quite honestly, Vue.js does better than React. And React, if you're listening, you should steal some of these ideas because they are awesome. Before I even delve into this compare-contrast between Vue.js and React.js, I want to actually kind of set the stage for what these two things are. And it's the easiest way to do that is just kind of taking what these web pages say at face value. So on Vue.js's website, they describe themselves as the progressive JavaScript framework. And that word is very key to kind of how Vue.js approaches how you use Vue.js. And this is compared to React, which describes it itself as a JavaScript library. Now, these are the two big themes, and it's been the source of countless debates between what is a library, what is a framework. I think when I actually look between React and Vue.js, and I actually think about those words in context of these frameworks and libraries, it kind of crystallizes what that actually means. So I just want to kind of, not exactly caveat what I'm going to say here, but it kind of gives better context on why the decisions have been made by each of these frameworks, because Vue.js is a framework and React is a library. Also, before I delve into this, this is not trying to start a flame war. This is not trying to start this is better, this is worse. This is me literally just looking out into the ecosystem and trying to understand why is Vue.js popular and what potentially can React learn from Vue.js to make itself better. This is in the pursuit of making things better, not to tear something down. So that's my disclaimer. Disclaimer out, let's get into the meat of this video. One of the coolest features of Vue.js is their concept of a single file component. Most components in either Vue.js or React require three things. There is the template, there is the behavior, like the actual JavaScript, and then there are the styles. And with Vue.js, they have wonderfully combined all these things into one nice, developer-friendly experience. This is what a single file component looks like in Vue.js, where you have here the template, which is what the actual component looks like. Then you have a script which defines the behavior of this component. And then you also have the style as well in the same file. And you can see here it says scoped. And what that means is that Vue.js will actually scope these styles to just this template. So you can have as many of these components as you want. You can have as many components as you want, all with their own p tags, all with their own individually scoped styles. And that is just out of the box provided by Vue.js. And one thing I actually like that they say on here to kind of beat the naysayers to the punch when people ask about separation of concerns. One thing to note is that separation of concerns is not equal to separation of file types. So this file is separating the concerns from data, template, and styles, but it's just in one file, which I think is fine and I think is awesome. You kind of already have this in a React component as well, especially with hooks, where you have all defined in one function, the behavior, which is up here with the hook, and you have the template here. The big missing piece with React is the style aspect, which I'm going to actually get to in a later part of this video, so stay tuned to that. And again, React has libraries that help you do styles inside of a React file, where you can, there's the library of motion that lets you easily inject CSS into your template or your JSX, and that'll automatically style things. But this is, again, a separate library that you have to include. You have to know to install and then include and configure into your React application. Whereas with Vue.js, it is just built in and by default there. Any sufficiently large UI application will inevitably need two things: a routing solution and a data state management solution. In Vue.js, both of those things are first-class supported libraries by the Vue.js core teams. They have their own Vue router for routing in large Vue applications. It is officially supported by Vue.js, so it means that for any newcomer coming to Vue.js, if they want to do routing, there is an officially supported router they can just use and be confident that it will be around forever. Of course, you can use third-party routers if you want, but by having that first-party router is an extreme vote of confidence in both the sustainability of that library, but also newcomers knowing what to use. They have many routers in React. React router is probably the de facto second-party router, I would say. It's not first-party. It's a little bit more official than third-party, so I'll call it second-party, which is a weird thing to say, which makes no sense, but there you go. But again, you have to know that React router exists to then install it in, whereas this is on the actual official Vue.js docs pages to use this router. And likewise, for large state management, Vue.js has the library Vuex to handle large centralized state management for Vue.js. It's a first-party maintained library. Again, for newcomers, it makes it a very easy choice to know what to use when you're actually having to deal with state management. It's heavily inspired from Redux, which again, in the React land, you can use Redux for that, or Flutter, and now Recoil.js is another option, but it's all outside of the Vue.js core. To be fair, Vuex and Vue Router are not actually bundled into Vue themselves, but they're still first-party maintained libraries. And by having that vote of confidence is just great for newcomers into the field. And I would love to see something like that in React, to have first-party answers for these two highly common issues that every application has: routing and state management. Here is a big thing that Vue.js does better than React. Here's the Vue.js homepage. If I go to Docs and click on this little link called Style Guide, this is the official style guide for Vue-specific code. What this means is that if you are just coming to Vue.js and you want to know the best way to write Vue.js applications, what is the best style for certain questions, how should you do multi-word component names, how should you use component files, there is this style guide that answers all of those questions. Just for free, online, maintained by Vue themselves. This is incredible. Why doesn't React have it? I want React to have this. There are so many idioms and conventions with the React land, and you could argue that it's good to have that as well. But for newcomers to React, that is horrendously overwhelming to know, should I have my component names be camel case, kebab case, snake case, like all these questions that you have when you're starting an application, when you are order of words in component names, just to make different Vue.js applications more similar as you navigate from one code base to another is immensely valuable. That was the whole value proposition of Golang with the Go format, making it so that every Go application, content aside, is styled the same, so that the amount of effort to get into reading the code is as small as possible. This style guide is absolutely incredible, and I think one of the secret weapons of Vue.js to make Vue applications as consistent and proper as possible. And then, of course, you can automate this with ESLint rules and the like, and React has that as well, but there's no official, the only official React ESLint rules is for hooks, to make writing React hooks easier. But this just goes way beyond that, and it is fan-frickin-tastic. I told you I'd talk about styles, and here I am. Vue.js has built-in support for class and styles. So that means is that if you want, this requires some Vue.js knowledge, but essentially it's saying that Vue.js has the React class names library built into the framework itself, which is awesome. So if you have a variable called, is active, if that variable is true, then Vue will apply the active class name to this div, to this class binding. So again, if you have is active is true, so given that you have a static class name like this, static, you have this object of classes where these variables is active, has error, these are the class names. If is active is true, then it will render this static active built into Vue.js by default, for free, no coupons required. React, you have to know that this class names library exists. I don't think it's referenced on the React docs pages. It's an awesome library, but in some ways might be nice to have, not exactly built in by default, but it's such a common concern that there should be some attention paid to this. And that's kind of like a theme that I saw when I was reading through Vue.js, is that it does whatever it can to make your life as a developer easier. And also, again, to reference my earlier point, that's why Vue.js is a framework, whereas React is a library, which has its own trade-offs. Also, what's really cool about Vue.js is it has support for inline styles. So if you want to just put inline styles just like React, you can do that. But where Vue.js takes it up a notch is that if you have inline styles, Vue will automatically add vendor prefixes for styles that require it. Because again, it can, because it has its own template syntax, it knows about this, and it can do that, and that is really, really cool. Here's a style difference between Vue.js and React that I actually found that I liked Vue.js is a little bit better. In React, you have children as a prop to pass content inside of a component. So if you have this component called fancy border that is injecting props.children, you can use the component fancy border to inject content inside of it. And that is pretty much, I think, the most common use case that you have. You want to kind of put things inside of there. If you want to have different places to put children, the React solution is to just add more props, because everything is a prop in React, which is both very simple, but also maybe too simple. So you have here the component split pane, we have props left, props right, and you use it here, split plane with left and right. That's fine, that's good. Feels kind of like a hack, but it kind of just fits in with the whole idea of React. Whereas with Vue, they use these things called slots, which is actually inspired by the web component draft spec, which is kind of cool. Web components is kind of the official Vue.js React solution that has never happened. I'm not going to delve into that whole story, but essentially, if you have a component like this, where this is your custom component in Vue, you've got content inside of it, the template that you have would just put the slot element to replace the add to do content here. So it would render what it would do here. So this is very similar to props.children in React. However, where I think Vue kicks it up a notch is when you have those multiple slot situations. So if you have name slots, so here we have where are we gonna go here? Here is our custom component template. And we have a header, main, and footer. They have what's called a named slot. So you can use this slot element multiple times and then assign a name to different areas. And then when you want to put content inside of it, so for example, this component is called base layout. Inside of it, you would say template vslot header. Vslot is a directive in Vue for doing kind of behaviors in the template itself. I'm not going to delve into it right now, but you have header, default, and footer, and that's how it actually renders the content here. And also what I like about Vue.js is that they have the raw, verbose name of functionalities, but they also have short names. So instead of having to do that v.slot, you can just use the hash symbol to reference where those places are going. But even further, you can omit, I believe, the default if you want, if it's the default one. But you have here template default, the template header, template default, and template footer for easily saying where content should show up, which I think is a little bit less crowded than having to just inject everything into a component prop itself. So different ways of solving the same thing. I think Vue.js is a little bit more ergonomic, if I could say, but the other one's wrong, but I like Vue.js is maybe just a little bit more. Okay, now we're delving into the deep land of Vue.js and talking some real Vue.js specific things. So to start off things, to give you a brief background, all you React engineers watching this, I assume, Vue.js has a template language for writing Vue.js components, which is similar to JSX, but also not at all. You do interpolation of content with these double braces, similar to Mustache.js, if you used those in the past. And inside of Vue templates are things called directives. And they're a special attribute prefixed with v-, and it's a way to reactively apply side effects to the DOM when the value of its expression changes. So in this case, this directive is v-if. So if the scene variable is true, then you would see this element. If it's false, then Vue.js will remove this entire element. Of course, in React, you would just kind of do plain JavaScript where you'd say scene and then the component on the right-hand side. But directives let you kind of express things in a different way. And you can actually see a whole list of directives on their documentation. This is kind of the entire list of directives, text, so you can read it online at your own leisure. But with directives, the cool thing here that I love with Vue.js is that there's such things as directive modifiers. And these are almost shortcuts for hyper common tasks that you have to do when writing UI applications. So there's event modifiers. So if you have a click event in the page where you can, so here's the example over here. There is the v-on directive where you can say on click, call this method. So this is a very simple, with React, it would just be on click. But then you also have modifiers. So for example, there's this whole list of modifiers you can assign to these click events to just add all this common functionality for free. So there's the .stop modifier to call stop propagation, prevent to call prevent default, so on and so on. There's the once modifier to just trigger the event once. And it's just all these, what else is there? There's modifiers for the vModel directive to make the number be typecast. So you could, if you have an input element and you have an age variable, you can bind this input to the age variable and make sure that it's typecast to a number and not a string, and Vue will just handle that for you. There's also key modifiers. So for example, on an input, on key up event, when the enter key is hit, call the submit event. Like this is just built in for Vue.js for free, which makes it so easy just to build, I think, UI applications. Again, it's not hard to do this in React, but to have this built into Vue is just a very, very nice experience. And kind of, again, highlights the difference with Vue is the framework and React is a library. Something else very cool is the vModel directive is a way to make two-way data bindings between input, text area, and select elements. And what's really cool about the vModel directive is that it abstracts away how you actually set values on these input elements. So for text and text area, it uses the value property. For checkboxes, it uses checked. And for select fields, it uses value and the change event. Just You don't have to worry about the implementation details. It's just done for you by vModel, which you could argue is good and bad, but it's also just really pragmatic. You don't have to worry about things at all. Things just work as you expect. Use vModel in the variable, and you're good to go. And it wouldn't be a framework if you couldn't extend it, which you can do with custom directives with Vue, which isn't really what Vue recommends you do. It says that the primary form of code reuse and abstraction is components. However, if you want to make your own custom directives, you can. And I think a great example of this is this custom focus directive. So if you want to have an input element be automatically focused on mount, you can make this directive to do that for you. So you can just use input be focus, this custom directive, and on page load, it'll automatically just focus that input for you. Which again, you can do with React with a hook. You can make a custom input component, kind of wrap like a auto focus input component, which is fine, but this is kind of clean, where you easily say that this is the input element that should be focused, and you can use it wherever you want in your entire application. So an alternative way of doing things, which isn't strictly better, but is also maybe a little bit more cleaner in more instances than I would actually expect than just making a wrapper component would be. And last but not least, something that is very cool about Vue.js is that in Vue 3, they actually rewrote Vue from the ground up in TypeScript. Just like with React, they redid all of React and React 16 with Fiber. Vue is rewritten in TypeScript itself, which means that the TypeScript support is first party, so to speak, because it's directly provided by the code itself. And it's not a huge thing. Like React TypeScript support is fine, but in terms of, the community, like the community is definitely shifting more towards TypeScript, and having this be written in TypeScript, I think is just kind of, it's a fun little easy win over React, honestly, in my opinion. And with that is my very long list of what Vue.js does better than React. I think in some ways React it's somewhat of a disadvantage to Vue because it's just a library, although very all-encompassing one. And if it wasn't for the community support of React, I think that this comparison would actually be very uneven. I think a lot of the ways that React and Vue are in parity is the community support holding up React. But again, that's because it's a library. It's trying to just focus on UI and ignore everything else, which is fine, but I feel like at this point in time, you kind of have to have all these other parts at least be officially, recognized by React or something more. Right now, the hands-off approach is just way too hands-off. There needs to be a little bit more love there for sure. But Vue.js is open arms embracing its role as a framework and doing everything it can to help you when making a UI application. Single file components, having officially supported library, the style guide, oh my gosh. Built-in support for styling, slots, directive modifiers to make easy tasks easy, and also written in TypeScript. It's just, frameworks can do more than libraries, just can, but it's amazing to see how their popularity is pretty, React is probably still more popular, but it's been around for longer, but it's kind of interesting to see what each strengths and weaknesses both of these things have. That's my video. Hopefully you learned a few things about Vue.js you didn't know about before. I certainly did. Some of these things really blew my mind, and I'm curious to hear what gets you excited about Vue.js. Looking forward to more videos coming at you every week. Subscribe if you aren't already a subscriber to see more videos like these. And I'll catch you in the next video. Till then, keep coding, stay happy.